So welcome everybody. It's lovely to see all of you at the moment, but I might not see some of you in a minute because we're going to ask some of you to turn your cameras off if possible while the speakers are talking, but please keep them on for the moment while we're just welcoming everybody in. My name is Nina and I'm the chair of the South West Peninsula Co-op Party Council, and so here today to represent Party Council and say a big thank you in particular to Saxon and the team at Devon at LCF for bringing together such a fantastic panel of speakers today. It's a really opportune time for us to gather on a sunny Saturday afternoon to look to the future and see how in these really challenging times we can build back better and build back more cooperatively, and look at how we can work together to share our knowledge and share our expertise of building cooperatives in our local communities, and how that can really help our communities, but also look at how it can help our elected representatives and getting more elected representatives in the elections whenever they may be. So there's lots of things coming up, lots of things to discuss. Please, just a bit of protocol, please, if you're not speaking, can you make sure you're on mute? And if you want to keep your cameras off, that might be useful, depending on sort of bandwidth, Wi-Fi issues. It might help us if we're buffering every now and again. Also, just to remind everybody that this is being recorded. So again, if you don't want your don't want to be seen in the background, then please make sure your camera is off. We've got the first hour. We've got a series of speakers that are going to present some excellent cases of what they're getting up to in their local communities, and then at 3 o'clock we will be having a general discussion where you're able to then ask the panel some more specific questions. But please keep the questions coming, put them in the chat as you're going along, and then we can keep track of those as we're moving forward. So if there's anything else I've forgotten, Mary or Saxon, let me know. Otherwise, I shall hand over to our first speaker. All good to go? I'm getting a general nod in that direction. Good. Okay, so looking forward to spending the next couple of hours with you and working cooperatively to see how we can use today's discussions to really push us forward in the year ahead. So first up today, we have Martin from who's a cooperative development practitioner. So Martin, if you're happy, I shall hand over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. You can hear me okay, can you? Yeah. I just put cooperative development practitioner because I couldn't think of any other way of describing what I do. But just a quick skate over that. It means that in essence, what I do is I do whatever I can to get co-ops up and running, or to keep them up and running, or to convert into co-ops from other forms of enterprise. And like most co-op development practitioners, I end up doing a lot of that for free because there's no money out there for co-op development, essentially. But I'm here now talking about the cooperative difference, because what I find in my 30 to 40 years of experience of the cooperative movement is that many of us, even within the movement, sometimes forget the basics and forget the differences between co-ops and other forms of enterprise. So I was just going to skate across those for the purpose of the session today. Most people think of co-ops as either small, idealistic and struggling enterprises with bearded individuals and others working desperately to try and keep them afloat, or they think of the co-op shop. But what they don't realize is that many cooperatives are also corporations. And corporations, as we know them, the standard model corporation, or as I call them, the speculative corporation, is really at the root of all the things that we can say are going wrong on the planet today. I think that's a very important point to make, is that the standard model speculative corporation is what's causing all the bulk of the problems that we're facing now. And the difference between the standard model corporation and the cooperative corporation is roughly as follows. In a co-op, it's one person, one vote. In a speculative corporation, it's one share, one vote. That means a millionaire can waddle into a corporation, a standard model speculative corporation, and take it over. He can just buy shares willy-nilly and be in control and determine its processes. If such a person should waddle into a cooperative corporation, They couldn't do that. They could put in as much money as they like, but they'd still be restricted to one person, one vote. And they'd have to convince a lot of other people to change direction if that's what they were there to do. The other point is that standard model speculative corporations do not have morality built in. There are no principles guiding them. They are driven by the bottom line. And all the chief executives who are in position and aspiring to be in position as chief executives know that the ultimate thing that they're searching for is return on value to shareholders, and that's to the exclusion of all other purposes. They make noises occasionally about having values and principles, but in essence, it's only cooperative corporations that have those principles built in, internationally recognized principles built in, that the membership can assure that the corporation is actually adhering to in general terms. The other point is that the standard model speculative corporation was conceived essentially to separate responsibility from ownership. This was the ideal vehicle for Victorian gentlemen, Christian Victorian gentlemen, to engage in things like the slave trade, because they had a corporation, they were merely shareholders, they were saying, it's not me, I just have shares, and it distances them from the responsibility. And again, as I say, that's part of the root of the problem, is that we have massive corporations across the globe that are not applying any kind of morality to the activities they engage in. And then finally, the cooperative corporation has built in the distribution of wealth and distribution of ownership, and therefore distribution of control. So it's much more difficult to steer a co-op. It's harder for a co-op to adjust to some of the many changing factors in an economy, but what keeps them slow and plodding is the adherence to values and principles. Standard model speculative corporations aren't hindered in this way, and that's why they can get away with the sorts of things they do. I just also wanted to touch on what speculative corporations do. Speculative corporations centralize wealth, centralize ownership, and centralize control. So more and more of the world's economy is gravitating to fewer and fewer people. And we think of that as some form of natural process, but of course it's not a natural process. It's based on the speculative corporation, and that's why we should be avoiding speculative corporations, not dealing with them at all, and supporting and promoting cooperative corporations. The other aspect of this is what I call localizing the economy, and this should be in my illustrious past. I've worked at CDAs and I've been self-employed as I am now, but I've also worked in local authority economic development units. And of course, what the people there were primarily driven by was the idea of inward investment, which means if you can get a massive corporation to come into town, that's a big plus for you. You get a lot of kudos and a lot of respect and maybe even a bonus. But there's no guarantee that the corporation will stay, and it usually comes in at some kind of cost to, they'll say, well, you'll have to cut your rates for a start, and you'll have to give us some perks in terms of land acquisition, et cetera, et cetera. But what I was trying to say to my colleagues is that it's not just inward investment. What we want to do is make sure that the investment that is here in our locality stays here. And how do you do that? Well, you distribute ownership. You use the cooperative model, you distribute ownership so that the shareholders are also local residents. They're not actually living in New York or the Cayman Islands or anywhere else. They're actually on location, appreciating the services of the local authority, and willing to contribute to making their local communities better simply because they live there. And so we used to have, the last CDA I worked in was in Luton, and we had what we call a closure response unit of the economic development unit. And the closure response unit was myself and the chief executive. And what we would do is if we heard any rumors whatsoever in Luton about companies relocating or closing down or whatever, she would fire off a letter as chief exec to the chief executive of the corporation, offering complete confidentiality, but a chance to talk face to face. And when she got those opportunities, which she could because of her status and her influence, she'd bring me along, and I'd be sitting there as a kind of assistant taking notes and everything. But what we'd casually introduce into the conversation was the idea that the enterprise perhaps could sell to its employees, and that the employees could carry on with the enterprise and just simply buy up what's there, buy up the plant, etc., etc. And we had a few sort of near misses, but no successes that I can point to, regrettably. And unfortunately, that chief executive died of a heart attack shortly thereafter. And the new chief executive wasn't interested in the program at all, so it withered and died on the vine. But localizing the economy is still, you know, if you think through it, is an important part of economic development. It's not just about inward investment. It's about creating opportunities for diversifying ownership and diversifying control of enterprise, and making those enterprises appreciate what the local authority has to offer. There's various kinds of co-ops, but there's no point in going into them except to say that essentially you have worker-producer co-ops on the one hand and consumer co-ops on the other. And all the distinctions that we sometimes tie ourselves up with are usually those two, or derivatives of those two, or hybrids of those two. And for simplicity, it's often just best to bear in mind that that's what co-ops are. They're either owned by the people who work in them, or they're owned by the people who benefit from the service, as the retail co-ops do. And I just wanted to close with a final stat, which I quote quite a bit, which is to say that there was a United Nations report in 2014 which said that if the global cooperative economy was lumped together and considered as a national economy, it would be the 5th largest economy on the planet. And I don't think we as a movement understand that properly. I don't think we as a movement take advantage of that properly. But understanding the cooperative difference and understanding the way in which co-ops can change the orientation of massive global enterprise, and perhaps start to take real recognizable steps towards saving the only planet we have, and being responsible and having a moral base, that would be a way forward. And in fact, I've often said that the co-ops sector shouldn't deal with the host economy. The co-op sector should deal entirely within the cooperative sector. And I think the cooperative sector should even have its own currency. But I think that's my 10 minutes according to my watch. So unless there's any immediate questions, that's me done. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Martin. I think it's a really useful way for us to start sort of thinking about that big picture, about what the difference, the co-op difference, what that difference is, and a reminder of why we're all in this as cooperators, and looking at how we can then put that into a local context as well. So yeah, thank you so much. It's really useful. If there are any questions from them, please keep them coming in the chat, and we can always come back to those later as well. So thank you, really appreciate that. And I'm going to hand over now to Councillor Chris Penberthy, who is going to talk about some of the differences that we can make at a local council level to promote cooperatives, and how we can look forward at what we can be doing locally in the future as well. So hand over to you, Chris.
Great, thanks a lot, Nina, and it's good to see so many people here this afternoon. I'm not going to be apologetic. This is going to be really whistle stop, because there's loads of good stuff going on, loads we can learn from. So this is only highlights. I know in the invitation we sent out a couple of links to reports that might give some more detail, but just to give a little picture here in Plymouth as the starter, supporting cooperation is part of our strategic approach. It actually forms part of the values of our corporate plan, and is reflected. There's a cabinet post, my own, which is in part about cooperative development, and that's in the title. We also have a strategy to double the size of the cooperative economy here in Plymouth. That's our local base, so one's headquartered in Plymouth, by 2025. As a council, we've done quite a bit. So just as some headlines, we've worked to support setting up Plymouth Energy Community. It was our baby, though we gave it away very, very quickly. It's great to have Andrew on the call. Andrew was one of the cooperative development agents support agencies who worked to help us as we set up Plymouth Energy Community and PEC Renewables, and now we've got PEC Homes as well. And it's for reasons of investment, it's not just those three. There's a couple of others hiding away underneath it, but a whole approach to cooperation that's tackling fuel poverty, climate change, and renewable energy, and now housing. Cllr, which the council set up as a cooperative with the Plymouth Learning Partnership, and obviously has been really important to us over the last few months, because Cllr has been helping us on holiday hunger for a number of years, but as a cooperative it's really stepped up to the plate and received plaudits for the work it's been doing to feed children, not only during school time but during school holidays as well. The Four Greens Community Trust, which is a community economic development trust up in the north of the city that we've been established, and they've been feeding quite a lot of people over the last few months because they've moved a lot of their work to emergency response. Delt Services, which isn't itself a co-op but is set up with cooperative values and principles. There are some issues when you as a council own things for technical exemptions in order that you don't end up having to continually go out to contract. So, but that's there and is offering a number of services and has been keeping both the council and the CCG IT working, and they've done a lot of work to help that become more remote over the last few months. We've done work with the City of Plymouth Credit Union, Nudge Community Builders, Southwest Mutual, Call for Fish, and we're already thinking about what cooperation might mean in terms of food, health and death, to name but three. There are some key recent pieces of work in terms of a national focus on the cooperative sector and how it can grow. Both of them pay little attention to the role of councils, but are really useful underpinning documents. NEF with the Cooperative Party published Cooperatives Unleashed, doubling the size of the UK's cooperative sector, and the Cooperative K published Do It Ourselves, a national cooperative development strategy that took a bit longer to develop. It was published about the same time because that was actually, that development strategy was developed in partnership with cooperatives across the UK. But with both of those really missing the role of councils, that was something that we discussed at the Cooperative Councils Innovation Network, and Plymouth put forward a proposal that we should actually, as a network, do something to redress the balance and put forward a perspective that local government could make a difference. CCIN took that on board and commissioned the City Council here to lead that national piece of work based on the experience of local government. So Cooperatives Unleashed from the Grassroots is one of the links that we sent you. The recommendations nationally talked about exploring the development of a state aid exemption, so that we could actually, as councils, get more involved in investment in the setup and support of cooperatives. But at a local level, the importance of championing cooperative principles as tools rather than a mandate, so everyone doesn't have to be a co-op. If we can get cooperative values and principles in place in a lot more businesses, and the understanding out there, if they do come to need to transfer to a co-op later, it's not cold, but also we can begin to get more people understanding it, and that's really important for us as a council as we seek to grow the base. For councils to recognise the concept of a cooperatively run business, to publish a corporate commitment to support growth of the cooperative sector, to state a preference for companies that are initiated by the council to be cooperatives, looking at skills for cross-sector working, the implementation of cooperative awareness training programs, implementing a council cooperative ambassador program, and ensuring that quality business advice is available locally from generic and specialist advisors. Now, that sounds very theoretical. If you look at the publication, there's lots of more detail, but just a few of the examples there. Oldham have set up both community leisure and community power cooperatives. Rochdale have set up Possibilities Rochdale, which is a health and social care float out of some of their services with some cooperative values and principles, but also have the Resonance Community Development Fund, specifically investing in cooperatives. Kirklees, we've got Colne Valley Care we'll be hearing about. Glasgow have the Cooperative Glasgow approach, which is a development unit within the council, but major work with Glasgow credit unions and Gllr Sport. Preston, need I say more? Birmingham Use It, Unlocking Social and Economic Innovation Together, which was the council and hospitals looking at how they could come together around technology and set up a number of COPs as a result of that. Greater Manchester have just done their Cooperative Commission, which they are now implementing, and other metro mayors are talking about doing the same. In Devon, I know Saxon was involved in work with the library service and how that would work within communities. I think some of the key messages from across all of that is that while councils can do a lot, actually you can do a lot in opposition as well. It's important that you know what you already have, that you work to support creating the conditions where cooperation and cooperatives can flourish, that you, as part of that, promote and support pathways into cooperation, and you look at what the national strategies can bring to your local context, and look at encouraging and supporting cooperative approaches to your targeted theme area or wicked problem. And just as a thought, start with information, move into support. Finance then comes later. So you don't need the money up front. You need to actually look at building people's understanding, bringing them together around what they're going to try and do and how they're going to make that a successful business, because cooperatives are successful businesses, and then coming to the finance later. And by then you'll have some good stuff. And if you've been working well with your council, whether in control or opposition, the council might well have a development support fund to support that, as we do here in Plymouth. So Nina, I started with Plymouth, ended with Plymouth, and I think that finishes me slightly ahead of schedule so that other people can get on and do other things and hopefully have more time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's really useful, I think, then to look at what is happening at a local labour and cooperative-led local council and some of the opportunities that there are for promoting a wide range of cooperatives and what we can look and learn from other places as well. So thank you so much. I mean, I've got a very, very soft spot as a secondary teacher in Plymouth for Cllr as well. They're doing some fantastic work. They really are, and really helping my particular school community as well. So it was great to hear them get such a big up as well. I'm going to pass over now to Andrew, who's going to talk to us about the opportunity in the Southwest for social care co-ops as well, and being that this is one of the main focuses for looking at the national sort of policy process in 2021 as well. It's really useful to have Andrew to give us an oversight of what's happening in that sector. So Andrew, if you want to unmute yourself, and I'll hand over.
Thank you very much, and very good to be here. I'm hoping that everyone can now see a screen called Community Shares, and what I wanted to do first of all was just to get you to, I hope, appreciate the degree of walking the talk that you're getting from your speakers today. I am the third bearded bloke to address you on the subject of cooperative cooperation. So I think that shows that our hearts are in the right place. Let's see whether our voices are as well. So what I wanted to do, and this will take, again, probably slightly less than 10 minutes, let's just see how we go, is first of all, what I like to do is to show you the right presentation. Just give me a moment. This is what happens when you have two presentations to give in the same afternoon. I do apologise. I was thinking that I would need to do something in order to keep your interest as the third person to be talking at you this afternoon. I think I've succeeded at least in focusing on my own inadequacies, so that's a pretty good start, you know. So let's see how we go now. I'm hoping now you can see a screen that says the social care cooperatives, the opportunity in the Southwest, and I'm looking to see if I get a nod from anyone. I shall assume that I have, since no one's speaking.
No, I can't see. No.
Okay. How about now?
Yeah, it's just loading up now. Brilliant.
Excellent. Okay, thanks very much. So what I wanted to talk about is two things really. First of all, I wanted to give a couple of examples of cooperative social care from around the country, and then to talk about whether and how we might be able to do cooperative social care successfully in the Southwest. And so moving right along, the first example I wanted to give is one that's certainly going to be familiar to Veronika, who's speaking after me, and it is the Equal Care Co-op. And the interesting thing about the Equal Care Co-op is that it looked at the issue of domiciliary care and the problems of domiciliary care. Now, some of those problems are of money. That money is that sector is notoriously short of finance, and that's reflected in the fact that a lot of people who are caregivers are on very low incomes. A lot of the people who receive care may also be in low incomes, or they get a limited amount of care because money is so stretched. But there are other problems as well, as you may well know. For example, if someone at home needs care several times a day, they may get a different carer visiting on each of, say, 4 occasions during the day. It becomes harder to build up a relationship with somebody. And also risky in the age of COVID. If you had one person, that would be a quarter of the risk on average of having 4 people coming to help you at home. The second thing about the sector really is that there's a level of inequity throughout the sector. People who receive care are seen as beneficiaries with very little, in many cases, very little ability to decide who will care for them and how. Similarly, caregivers are often low paid, employed by agencies, some of which are brilliant, some of which are less brilliant, all of which have to take some money, obviously, for the role that they fulfill. So it can be quite difficult, a difficult sector to operate in. And so what an Equal Care Co-op has done is to create a platform, a website, if you like, where people who need care and caregivers can meet and match with each other and develop a relationship between the two of them where the care will be provided by one person to the other. And very often this has some interesting results. It means that the person who's receiving care often finds that they have something they can give as well in support for the person who's offering the care, or as a volunteer with other people. So it's a much more equal relationship. Very often workers can get paid better because the overhead costs are much lower, because there's a system operated through an overarching website rather than lots and lots of care agencies. And it has other benefits as well, which can be that, I think most importantly, trusted relationships grow up between the people receiving and the people giving care. So that's a national organisation in its very early stages, as I'm sure Veronika will confirm, but it does exist, it has raised some money, and it's something where we might be able to pick up an existing model and use it here in the Southwest. Second example, I am not going to go into any detail on at all because Veronika is speaking and she is part of this organisation. I did want to say though, that this adult domiciliary care cooperative has been very successful in raising money, a point which I shall come back to in a minute. And now, because I cannot count, here is the third of my 2 examples, which relates to a different sector. This actually relates to nursery and early childcare. There are, as you may well know, there are several cooperative childcare and nursery care organisations in the country already. One of them is attached to Co-ops UK and has, I think, 20 little pioneers schools around the country. There's one in London called Grasshoppers in the Park. I mention this because I think there's going to be an increasing need to meet the problems of the childcare sector through a cooperative solution. I know that nationally, organisations like Busy Bee, one of the bigger providers, is looking at closing some of its provision because the money is getting tighter and tighter, and actually they can make more money by selling the old school or the property where they're supplying the care than they could from actually operating a childcare provision. And another thing that's relevant to this is that there are more and more ways in which people can come together to create childcare cooperatives. You'll see I mentioned Kidoop there, a childcare co-op app, mobile phone app. And this will allow parents to group together to form a childcare cooperative. And the members commit some time and resources to care for their collective children, but they also work with well-qualified childcare professionals. And I think there's going to be more and more opportunity to pick up the failure of private sector provision with a cooperative solution. So that's the third of my two examples. I'll just go on reasonably briefly to, can we do it here? And what do we need if we're going to try and do something in the Southwest? Well, I suggest that you could say there are lots of things we need to succeed in the Southwest, but I'm going to look at three aspects. One is people, another is money. You'll notice I've used the same order as Chris Penberthy did. I said you have to start with people and training and support and education and inspiration before you look at the money. And then after that, at a model that can be very useful in this context. So turning to people, first of all, you may say to me, yes, Andrew, we know the whole point about co-ops is that they are groups of people. You cannot have a co-op of one. And that's very true. But I was thinking about a slightly different aspect of this. What we're looking at if we're creating childcare co-ops, adult social care co-ops, is looking at creating businesses or helping businesses to start. And the thing about businesses is that they need entrepreneurs. That doesn't mean they have to be private sector red in tooth and claw free marketeers, but it does mean they have to be people who are inspired and dedicated and very, very determined to achieve something. You need those people who are prepared to pick up an idea and take it forward. And that's fundamental. And sometimes those people come up from the grassroots, as the phrase goes, and that's fantastic. And sometimes they actually appear within councils. And Chris was mentioning PEC, Plymouth Energy Community, a while ago. And that was something where actually councillors, including Chris, but also council officers were very keen to see something happen, got the public, made the opportunity aware, something that the members of the public were aware of, and collectively created Plymouth Energy Community, which is a cooperative. And in fact, a lot of the energy still comes from a very determined, very dedicated set of council officers. And so people come first, absolutely. Money is, however, important. And again, you may say, yes, of course, money is important, but I'd like to talk about it in this context. The question is whether the money stacks up, because particularly in the social care sector, one of our challenges is, isn't it, that there's just not enough money to go around for a lot of what we're trying to do. Councils are being constrained more and more in the money that they can offer. It's harder and harder to make the business case stack up. And my point here is that it's not a question of starting a co-op and then hoping the figures are going to add up. There has to be a good business case somewhere anyway, whether you're a cooperative or not. There's no good starting a co-op unless there's a business case. If there is a good business case, then we come to another aspect of money, which is how do you raise the money to start? So looking at how you raise the money to start brings me to the last little piece of the puzzle I wanted to talk about down there. What model can be used? And some people on the call know this model very well. So please do take the opportunity to gulp a bit of tea or bite another biscuit while I just complete the picture for everybody else. The point about the model I'm talking about, which is a community benefit society, is that it is a legal structure which has some similarities to a company, but also some similarities which Martin will be very aware of, and which definitely fit his model of one person, one vote. And so the first thing about community benefit society is it is part of the community. whether it's a geographic community, like for example, Plymouth, a community of interest, a set of people who want to see successful social care across the southwest, or a community of practice, a set of care providers, for example. But you need a community. The other aspect that must exist is that this community benefit society must trade. It doesn't have to do it in a covered market somewhere in Samoa by the look of it, but there must be some form of trading, and obviously buying and selling services, as happens in the care industry, is a form of trading. And the third thing is, this comes back to the point Martin was making, it must be democratic. Because this is a model where you raise money through shares, but it doesn't matter how many shares you raise, you only get one vote. So it's a good way of overcoming that problem that Martin was talking about. And there's a bit more to this share thing as well. Because they're not ordinary shares, they're community shares. This has a couple of effects. Because if a private sector company wants to go out to the public and raise a lot of money, it has to jump through a lot of hoops. It's an expensive business, it takes time, there's a lot of regulation, and that is a good thing. The reason it's a good thing is because the state and the rest of us want to make sure that that invitation to invest to the public is not going to rip the public off. If, however, you're a community benefit society, most of those hoops are removed. Not all of them. You've got to have a good business plan. You've got to have something with a share offer document that people can trust and believe in. But most of the hoops are removed. And the reason is that the model, the community benefit society itself, is ethical. Very often it will be a cooperative and it will abide by the cooperative values and principles. But whether it does that or not, it's regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, who will not allow it to be registered unless it fits their criteria, which boil down to being an ethical organisation, among other things. So it's possible to raise money in this way. And the reason I'm going on about this is that it's very, very useful in social care, as in other sectors, to have money to start a business. Sometimes you can get grants, usually not enough grants. And so the model is that you have a set of people with some money who invest that money into creating an enterprise, not necessarily a building. It can be a social care co-op. And then they receive perhaps some interest on their investment and they may get their capital back. So that's the basic model. And one of the points about it is that, as we will hear in a moment, Co-operative Care Colne Valley did this. The reason I mention that they used this model is not just that that's how they raised some money, but also the extraordinary success. See when it says that offer opened? 1st of July last year. When was it stated to be closing? The 1st of August. What is it stated to have raised? £150,000. That's not bad going in a month. So it's a good model for raising money, and I'm happy to talk about it till the cows come home. I spent a lot of my life creating these things, but yeah, I think it's got a great degree of relevance to creating social care co-ops. So there are the three aspects I wanted to talk about, and I have come to the end of my slides. So I will hand you back and we will see if there are any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That was really, really informative to see all of that information presented so clearly as well. So thank you. It's great to see. And also, I think it's also good to take from that once again, we see that the cooperative movement and cooperatives are at the forefront of really innovating on a lot of this as well. So we're the ones that are finding those new solutions to old problems and new solutions to new problems quite a lot of the time as well. So it's really good to see all the different innovation that is there and that is in seeing it in practice as well. So that's great. And then to hand over to our last speaker of this section, so, and please keep the questions coming in, and we'll go through those in the panel discussion just after 3 o'clock. But I'm really delighted to hand over to Veronika, who's going to talk in detail about the work that she has been doing and give us a real sort of tangible example of how all of these ideas have been put into practice. So over to you, Veronika.
Oh, thank you so much. I mean, that just feels like such an introduction. I'm just thinking, oh my God, how am I going to follow up on all this praise and everything? So hoping I will. It's been really useful to hear from all three of you, because you've touched on like a few of the bits I'm going to mention. So that's just really great. So I'm going to try and also maybe just move through those a bit faster than I thought, so that I can actually keep to the stuff you sort of, yeah, like we all want to hear, but a bit more of the practical examples. So I do want to start though by really coming back to why is it that we're doing this, and all of the three speakers before me have sort of mentioned that in terms of the benefits of how cooperatives can contribute to well-being of societies and communities, really. And why we have come together has been because the system of care provision is basically broken, and we want to change the default way it's set up, because we really do want everyone to have part in the process of receiving and giving care, and we want people to feel that they are a real part of it, that they have say, influence on how the business is run, that they can get the support they need to be able to do that as well. We want carers to be able to care and do their job well. We want families and communities to have say and sort of participate in the way that works. And we are a business, and we need and want to generate profit so that we are able to do this work. We can't shy away from that. But as sort of the models of how the co-ops work and how the framework works is, we won't be sort of using that, won't be using those profits for sort of personal benefit, but they will be all coming back into the business so that it gets developed further and we can sort of move forward. And so from the why and why we really feel passionate about this, I'm going to give you sort of three frameworky things about how we are trying to do that. We'll look at care in terms of how we want to deliver care. We'll look at staff and connection to how we want to work with our staff. And then also say that we don't want to just keep this to ourselves and really cooperate. And me being here, also having a platform to speak to you, is sort of part of that as well. So in terms of how we want to do care, is really essential that we really want to do care which is holistic and person-centered, which means going beyond person's needs and asking what sort of life people want to have and live, and what are their dreams and aspirations. And while we are clear that not everything might be possible immediately all at once, we want to have that there as a sort of a target to go towards and aspire for that. Because if we only concentrate on the needs, and if we are not able to meet those needs, it sort of feels like a race to the bottom, which often sort of happens now with the rigidity of the system. And our staff will play a massive role in that, our volunteers, families, and wider community will do that as well. And we're working towards a model which we call Cooperative Care Store, where you can see sort of little pictures of we envisaging eventually that all of the communities members who are connected to us will be able to give something into the store, and then whoever then needs whatever they might need and wish from the store will be able to sort of benefit from that. So that's sort of a framework we're trying to work towards from the very start. In terms of staff, I mean, the most important people in care are the people who need care and people who give care. That's just like very simple. And we know that right now, both of these groups are really being sort of disempowered by the whole of the system, and the system's really rigid, and it feels like doesn't allow at the moment, doesn't allow staff time to care. And so we want to move away from what is called time and task culture. We want to give our staff agency and autonomy and confidence and support so that they can do the support sort of beyond just following the plan which has been agreed. We are going to be paying all our staff at least real living wage, and we're moving away from 0-hour contracts and sort of gig economy so that people get fair treatment in the sort of formal way as well. And in terms of how that might get bigger than just Colne Valley, we want to keep and need to keep things small, because we feel it's really important that it does stay that way, because the scale would just make things not possible. And we're working with a vision or like a model which is called strawberry plant patch, where as a strawberry plant would sort of shoot a little shoot out, and then the little strawberry would start growing next to it. we're hoping that we'll be able to support other groups and communities which will want to do the same thing. We're sort of aiming and working towards working out what a model could be. We're calling it federation for now, but that could be also a legal term, so I don't take it absolutely literally, but we're looking at using economies of scale so that we can benefit and maybe offset some of the initial costs and some of the financial challenges which the starting up businesses face in this way. And we've been really lucky being funded by Power to Change to actually work on this in a dedicated way so that it doesn't just fall sort of way by as we're looking at the setting up of the co-op itself. While there's been lots I could talk about more and more and forever and ever, I was sort of thinking that I'll just sort of share two big learning points which we've sort of had so far, and it's been really interesting to sort of hear specifically from Chris and Andrew about people who are involved in the co-ops and what sort of influence that has, because one of our key learnings has been that having the right group of people with right support and with sort of right access to the right spaces has really helped us to move forward. The group which has set up from the very start looking at setting up the care co-op has been a great mixture of people. And one of the people who was our former chair is the local councillor, which just meant that, that just made things a lot easier. And we've had a great expertise and not just great commitment and passion, but we've been also then able to turn the enthusiasm into practical outputs of being able to apply for grant funding and actually receive the grant funding, and being able to work with the council really closely and then really specifically and tangibly benefit from that cooperation, so that we've been enabled and the sort of hoops have been taken out of our way so that we can move forward and actually sort of closer to what we want to do. And the second learning point is a really practical one, which is around ethical procurement. One of our key elements of how we want to do our work is make sure that we not only have positive impact within our communities locally, but we think about the whole world as our community. And sort of considering environment, of course, would be one of those parts, or one of those elements. And so it sort of made sense that we look at very practical and tangible things which are connected to care delivery, and we try and source them really well. And that's been a massive challenge. We've not been able to really identify really good ways of doing this really well. There's sort of lack of trading standards. It's really hard to trace some of the materials and sort of explore some of the supply chains really well so that you have real confidence. We found a few frameworks which we now sort of go by and with. So one of them, for example, is NHS Supplier Code of Conduct, which sort of stems from International Labour Organization trading standards, which is looking at slave work and child work within the supply chain. But we're also really aware that those big frameworks don't often work sort of fully, and we really want to keep going at this and making sure that we keep exploring what the options going forward could be. And I'll just close by saying and just sort of highlighting a couple of things which sort of have happened for us already, where we've got to do, which I think sort of also in itself summarizes where we're looking to go next. The first one have been the amazing success which Andrew already kindly highlighted around community share offer, where we've been able, within that month of summer of last year, able to raise over £80,000 from over 100 community investors, and that's been match funded through Power to Change booster scheme, which matches the funding from the community share offer. We've been able to get CQC registration in October 2020, and we're now ready to deliver care. We've recruited our first 4 carers, and we're in a sort of a paperwork and process mill, getting them ready to do things, and we're looking for business. We've already had some inquiries, which is great. It's different in how we sort of promote and market things now, because we can't meet people. So we've been working with local businesses and local mutual aid groups and local connections we already have, as well as sort of social media, and trying to just make things work as much as possible. We're working towards accreditation of real living wage, so that our commitment to paying the real living wage is actually sort of official and recognized, and we're able to sort of hold ourselves accountable to that. And we'll be continuing with our learning on the replication project funded by Power to Change. So the websites I have put and the links I have put in the slides, you'll be able to see a program of sessions. And some of you actually on the call have been to some of our sessions and are involved with us in sort of other hats and other roles, and or you might be approached after today, speaking about whether we can sort of work together a bit more closely on this as well. So I think that's it from me.
Thank you so much, Veronika. That was a fantastic presentation, and just so inspirational to see the work you're doing in such difficult times as well. You know, building a co-op to so successfully in the current climate is, you know, so impressive. So thank you so much. Really, really impressive and great. And as a keen allotmenter, I'm loving the idea of the strawberry plants. The strawberry plants is a very good way of describing how we can use and grow and share the practice that we're doing. So yeah, thank you so much. Be fantastic. So I'll hand over to Councillor Hilary Ackland, who's going to continue to chair the panel discussion now. So keep your questions coming in the chat, or put your hand up, or wave, and we'll try and make sure we get all your questions answered. So I'll hand over to you, Hilary.
Okay, thanks ever so much. Well, thank you all the presenters. I mean, it's just been absolutely fascinating. Very succinct, very helpful, but packed full of information and knowledge, which is really helpful if there are anybody on this call who's mindful to try and get some balls rolling. I have to say that I have a specific interest in this, not just because I chair the Exeter and Devon Cooperative Party and I'm absolutely keen and passionate about cooperatives, but because as a councillor, I have been really concerned about the problems we've got with workforce in Devon in social care, and I've been trying to push Devon, the Devon County Council like mad to sort of think about cooperatives, and it's like hitting your head against a steel wall, I have to say, for the last 3 years. But just in the last few months, I've kind of seen a little chink, because they're so desperate to get care workers. For all the reasons all of you have said about how people working in the care industry are really, really unhappy about working for domiciliary care agencies. Many of them have become independent and become personal assistants. So I've been in conversations with personal assistants, and I've been looking at ways with them that they can come together as a group to have a better say in an opportunity to work with Devon County Council. So this is really a nascent point for me, and I've been utterly fascinated by possible ways forward in hearing from you and about your models. But before I go into any questions, we've got somebody else coming alongside us on this panel, and I would like to suggest that Nicola could introduce herself for a minute to say who she is, because she didn't give a presentation. So if Nicola could do that now, that would be marvellous.
Thanks very much, Hilary, and hello everybody. I was absolutely delighted to be asked along this afternoon. Firstly, because having seen who was speaking and encouraging Veronika to participate, all of the speakers today are either members or on the dynamic purchasing system for the Co-op Council's Innovation Network. And you couldn't have had a better group of speakers. I feel that I'm here. I had my arm twisted a little bit behind my back, as some of you, Saxon, will attest, and Lisa. Because I joined the co-op movement around 10 years ago. I know some of you because I was in the membership team of the co-op group. Then I won a secondment to go to the International Cooperative Alliance and write the communications plan for the International Year of Co-ops, and was fortunate enough to launch the Global Cooperative Mark, which I've got on my screensaver behind me. So that global co-op, which every co-op in the world is allowed to use. When I left the ICA, and that was in 105 countries, which I thought that was pretty good. And then as Veronika, her domain, Valley Care Co-op, Andrew, who I've worked with at Bovey Futures, we have a .coop domain. And I think that you know, from my organisation's point of view, branding.coop, life would be so much better if you could walk along the high street or open a publication or look at a website and you knew immediately that it was a cooperative and not a shareholder business, as Martin was talking about earlier, so that we didn't have to think about where we put our hard-earned cash and which sort of organisations we were going to support. But it was just made so much easier for us. So I'm really keen on cooperative identity, but I'm also thrilled to be here with so many members of the Cooperative Council's Innovation Network, for which I do handle their operations, marketing and comms. So that's a little bit from me.
Thanks ever so much, Nicola. That's really helpful to put you in the context with the others. It's lovely. I'd like to start by going through the questions that were on the chat. First of all, a number of people put in questions, and I think it would be quite useful to begin with them. So the first one was Saxon had a question about models of common ownership. Saxon, do you want to fill that question out? Or are you
I just wonder whether my question might come later.
Okay.
But I am concerned. I mean, having been in the party a long time, I've been part of some very heated discussions as to whether something can be counted as cooperative when it hasn't got the, isn't a pure cooperative. But when we look at the county council, for instance, all the libraries have stayed open because it's become a mutual side. There's also social enterprises, common interest companies, and myself, I'm a leaseholder who has become a freeholder, which if a majority of the leaseholders I'm in a set of 28 retirement flats, by the freehold, you then become owners and you decide how all the money is spent. And we are already, nearly everyone has joined it's a limited company, but nearly everyone has joined. We all have an equal share. We all have a voice in making decisions, and we elect, as it happens, 3 directors. So I'm chair of those directors, but I feel it's effectively a co-op. So I'm just wondering if, particularly when you're dealing with something like Tory Council, whether we can also, I mean, I hope we will develop some real co-ops, I'm not at all, but I also think there may be other ways of developing community enterprises.
Right, thanks for that, Saxon. I think what I'd like to do is to get a response from everybody on that, because I think all the panel members will have something to say about that. But what I'd like you to do is, could you focus on, we know there's lots of models, different ways of approaching what is not an out and out capital speculative cooperation, as was mentioned at the beginning, where money is the ultimate, profit is the ultimate, and everything else takes second place. There are other setups where that's not the case, but they're not necessarily directly and authentically speaking a co-op. But so perhaps we could have a response from each of you on these various ownership models and your feeling about them. So if we start from the beginning with the first one was Andrew, I think. No, Martin. Martin, could you, a couple of minutes each, please? That would be great.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned at the outset, really there's only 2 kinds of co-op, and that's either a consumer co-op or a worker co-op. And the consumers are like the retail societies, where the members are the people who purchase the goods and benefit from the services. And worker co-ops are the struggling ones we tend to see, which are owned by the workforce themselves. But you can also get hybrids of those, and hybrids are often combinations of these. For example, in the cooperative group, although it's a consumer co-op, a lot of the employees are also members. So that in itself is a hybrid. But also in fact, further to Jeffrey's question, he mentioned, what about community interest companies and community benefit companies? And that's simply broadening the beneficiary base. And that gets kind of outside of the purest cooperative approach, but isn't necessarily non-cooperative if you have a broader understanding of what you're trying to achieve. As long as it's democratic, as long as it's one person, one vote, as long as the proceeds are being distributed equitably, then it ticks most of the boxes. But one of the other things I wanted to mention just quickly is the common ownership aspect. The really pure co-ops are not owned by the members per se. They're owned by the members in trust for the members that follow, in much the same way as we should be looking after our planet. It's not our planet. We hold it in trust for the time we're here, but it's ultimately for the benefit of people who are yet to come that we're trying to make the thing work properly. That's the essence of common ownership, and that's a theme that runs through all these models.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Martin. So, well, is it Andrew next? No, Chris. Sorry, Chris.
Thanks, Hilary. I think Saxon's right that when it comes down to the practicality of what it looks like on the ground, people are less constrained by what the organisational sort of legal structure is and whether it's registered in one way or another. I think if you're thinking from a council perspective or a councillor perspective, rather than the sort of looking down the very sort of pure routes from cooperation, I think you have to look in a slightly different way, and you do need to look at the breadth of what those might be. And I think there you have to look at the values and principles of the ICA and how they translate across. And I hasten to say that some people who are registered as co-ops don't act very much like co-ops, and some people who are registered like KICs act nothing at all like co-ops. And you can get a really good KIC that actually doesn't seem to engage and get any sense of ownership from the community, but you can get others that do. So I think it's about how the values and principles of the ICA are put into practice. And when it comes to local government, that can also be about the way that you can invest. So if we were to use Catered, Catered's shareholders are different from its members, although there is some crossover. The two shareholders are members, but they're only two of alongside 69 other members. And that was because the investment needed to come from somewhere, and it came from the council and from the Plymouth Learning Partnership, which is itself a co-op of all the schools. And the council actually has slightly larger share ownership, which it means it can use some of the legal exemptions in terms of procurement, because you also have to be careful about that. Similarly, DELT has all the values and principles of the ICA in the middle of it, but it's registered as a company, and people can buy its services, or they can buy in as members to the bits of the services of the shared service company they belong to. But then the values and principles arrive about voice and distribution according to investment and all sorts of other things. So I think it is complicated when it comes to the local bit, but I think what we need to be doing is putting those principles of cooperation out there and getting people used to them and using them and implementing them, in order that we can do the best we can, because everyone will be different. And as a shareholder in PEC, I don't receive any of or PEC Renewables, I don't receive any of the electricity directly. I might by chance get something filtered through the grid, but I don't buy my energy from them. So I'm not a user, I'm not a worker, but it is an energy co-op. So I think, it becomes quite convoluted in some ways, but I think it's that values and principles really matter. And I think that's the bit that when you start to work through, the organizational legal structure comes second to values, in my perspective.
Thanks, Chris. That's helpful. So we've got a situation where you can have a variety of business models, but there's an underpinning essential nature, which is based on the values, one person, one vote, and a sort of democratic approach. If you've got any kind of board or shareholders who are involved in democratically making decisions about business strategy, we might come up talk about that a little bit later, because I think that's quite an interesting aspect, resilience, and how businesses can be, their strategy within a group, who makes a decision about what that is and how resilient that can be. And that's really important if you're trying to set up something that is going to be handed over eventually to others and not collapse. So it is incredibly complicated. So if we turn now to Andrew, he can maybe give us a little bit more insight into the different forms of this sort of approach to business and to the how we.
I will. A little bit is about right. A little bit is about right, I think, on that one, Hilary. The point is that you're talking to three, so far, you've heard from three pragmatists. I shall be interested to see what Veronika has to say, but you've been talking to three pragmatists. Basically, we all believe in the values and principles, but we want to see stuff happen. And we don't want a legal structure to stop us seeing stuff happen. And so you're getting this particular position. You could talk, as you will all well know, to other people in the movement who would take what I would call a much more purist approach. They would say, for example, that a community interest company cannot be a cooperative because it exists to benefit the community. Well, I won't go on about why, but anyway, they say it cannot be a cooperative. Well, fair enough, but it cuts out one of the ways, one of the models which we can use to help us to get where we want to go. But I think the key point is that there mustn't be anything in the legal structure which completely prevents the application of cooperative rules. And an ordinary share company, as Martin has said, an ordinary share company where the voting power is related to shareholding is so antithetical to cooperative values, it's hard to see how that strict model could be a cooperative. But beyond that, it's a question of saying either it is self-evidently a co-op, like a cooperative society, or it is something else, but it's adopted the cooperative values and principles and, as Chris said, actually applies them. And that's quite a challenge.
Okay, that's really helpful. So we're talking about, there is a pure cooperative model, but there are other models which will take aspects of the cooperative model and be sort of bend them to suit the context in which they operate, or because of the way the people who have set something up want to operate. But that is still within that area where we've got more people being in control of more of the business than we have with, like, in a speculative corporation. So it's sort of, you know, it's a market, the business models can vary, and there'll come a point when it gets so far away from the co-op, whatever it is, and the values of the co-op, that it stops being part of that sort of family of businesses which have that sort of approach. Maybe we're going to talk to Veronika, and Veronika, you may have another spin on this or a way of looking at it.
Well, I'm just going to start with saying I'm no governance expert. So, like, a lot of these things sort of mean things to me in terms of I know bits of the differences legally, logistically, but not much, quite frankly. We've got, I'm really lucky that I'm part of the team where other people are, so I've been guided by them.
But you're working a co-op model, though, a proper co-op, a pure co-op model. So maybe you could say what the main features of that co-op model.
See, and there I'm not sure whether, according to maybe Martin, we are a pure co-op model based on what he was describing, because we are a community benefit society, which is what Andrew talked about, and we are a multi-stakeholder co-op. Therefore, our ownership and being part of the society is not based on financial investment, is based on being a member of the society. So the way we work in it and the way we believe we're going to be able to involve not just staff and not just volunteers and not just the investors in the workings of it, but also the volunteer members, also the family members, most importantly, the people who receive care from us. And all of these people will be offered membership. It's not going to be compulsory for anybody, but everybody will have a chance to become a member of the society. And therefore, have influence through the board and through representatives and through channels to influence how the society runs. What it's yet to see is how well we're going to be able to do it practically. And I think we have to be really careful around this, because, you know, we have these aims and aspirations that this is how it's going to work, but we really, really will have to make sure that we will have to make it work. It would mean proactively creating spaces and platforms in accessible ways so that people know where to go with suggestions, so that we work with our staff in a way that they know that if they have suggestions, ideas, proposals, they go to a board member, or they go to a manager and they go to a board member, or whatever the system's going to be. And if people who get care from the staff members and from the volunteers talk about things, they will move that so that we all are able to have platforms to talk about it. We're looking at like action research models to get a bit of funding so that we can like do that really well. And we're still working out how that's going to work practically, because we're starting really small. I think initially that will give us the space to also think about it and look at it practically. But another thing I'd add as well to that would be that apart from looking at us and the sort of technicality of how we do it, when we're doing the work through the learning project, which we funded for by Power to Change, we're also doing a sort of a community audit, looking at who else is delivering care out there. And we don't think we're the only ones who are doing care well. There's lots of organizations and models where good care is delivered. And so where we're looking at hook up with these providers, that would be connected to stuff which has been mentioned here around principles and around values and around what sort of care they deliver with and for people, rather than around the governance structure specifically, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. I mean, we've got a couple of questions coming in, I think, which are quite helpful, but we'll have Nicola's response first before I bring these other questions in. Yes.
I just a couple of things to add, really. Martin said earlier about how the co-op sector, the type of organisations that were part of the sector, and I think it was, I don't want to lose this one, but it's Dan Dave. I don't know which way, if it's Dave Dan or Dan Dave, but who's on the call, and he mentioned housing co-ops. I think it's if you look at the International Cooperative Alliance and EURICSI, which is the research organisation based in Trento in Italy, they launched, they look at the value of cooperatives globally, and on Wednesday this week they launched the 9th edition of that report. I think Martin referred to it earlier, where it's the top 300 cooperatives in the world that have a turnover of $2.146 billion US, which is somewhere between France and Italy, number 7th based on turnover. 104 of those are agriculture, 101 are insurance, and we haven't mentioned insurance cooperatives today. 33 are retailers. I think because we're Brits, we all go back to our parents and our grandparents' divvy numbers, and we think of because it's on the high street, but it's just one part of the sector. Only 3 of those 300 are worker co-ops. I didn't have a look at the figures. I was on the call at the launch on Wednesday, but my guess is that Mondragon will be one of those top 300. 2 of them are multi-stakeholder co-ops. Nobody's mentioned today, but we've been joined, I don't know if she's still on, but Pat Juby, who's the co-op party, she's our NEC rep. I don't know if she's still here. But Pat and I were part of the Revolver cooperative, which is a coffee co-op, a multi-stakeholder co-op. So there are other types of cooperatives that I think it's important that we don't lose sight of, and not least credit unions. I think when I first got engaged with co-op stuff, I was I don't know if they still do it, but Plymouth Credit Union teaching money management to young people in Plymouth by giving them a credit union account and starting that up. You know, there's so many different aspects of ways that we can encourage young people and older people to look at the different ways that they interact. So I didn't want to lose those couple of points. In terms of councils, I'm just going to press go on a link in the chat, but there's over 250 case studies on the Cooperative Councils Innovation Network website. One of those is from South Tyneside, and I know that when COVID hit last year, the former leader of South Tyneside said of all of the community centres, I think there was a dozen community centres that they funded, and they put 11 out. They helped put 11 as co-ops. So there was one that was just part of the council. There was only one that came back to the council and said, we need some money to help us through COVID. Now, it's not rocket science that one was the one that was funded by the council, but the one that had been, all of the others that had been formed into a co-op that were embedded in the community didn't have the same financial issues. And then just on the health and social care, several years ago, there's a cooperative in Suffolk called Leading Lives, and Veronika might have heard of them. They were a spin out from Suffolk Council into a worker co-op. Yeah, there are some really, there are some good examples of where council services have been supported down this route. Hopefully those 250 case studies, I'm not going to go through all of them, so don't worry. But there are, I'll put some links into the chat box if people want to have another look at those. I can see Pat's on the call now. She's in the bottom window, so hi to Pat.
Right, Nicola, thanks very much for that. There are, I mean, that's given us more things to think about, but it seems like we've got a variety of ways of going about setting up a co-op and turning them into practical businesses. So there is a question about, I'm looking for it on the chat, about the idea of what makes a co-op become a business? How is it registered? Do you build it up bit by bit, or do you register with Companies House? Is it the same way as you would do with, has it got, what kind of stages does it have to go through? So if people wanted to say, set up a co-op and they got themselves a bit of money and they had the people, what would be their next step in a practical way? Andrew. You're muted, yeah.
I say I need to unmute, yeah. I'd say the first thing that group of people needs to do is to sit down and decide what it is they're trying to achieve. And once they've decided what their vision is, then they can pick from among the constellation of possible legal structures which one to adopt. You don't have to use any legal structure to be a business. A business as such doesn't have any legal status. But there are lots of possible legal structures you can use if you are starting a business, and it's a question of picking the right one. For example, for what it's worth, this is marginal, but I'll say it anyway. One of the things I do when I'm helping people to start a social enterprise is to go through a mind map with them online, because it's online now, which has 8 different legal forms on it. And we go through the pros and cons of each so that the people on the call can narrow down which one they want. But all of those legal forms can act as businesses. So it's just choosing the one that suits, and then the steps you go to register on it depend on which one you've chosen.
Lovely, that's really straightforward and answers that question. I think, Martin, do you have something to add to that? You're muted, Martin. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that when I advise startups, I don't discuss models at all. I go directly to the business plan. I say, okay, let's thrash out a business plan, and arising out of that, you begin to look at models. And in fact, in the old days, I used to advise not incorporating at all until there was some kind of collective liability, like a loan or an asset of some kind. But I know a lot of practitioners will go in depth on the variation on the models, at the outset, which I think is confusing for users. So I would urge practitioners not to get into models at the outset, simply just get into the business plan and crank that out with the projections and then see what evolves.
So we're getting a sense of, you know what you want to do, develop a business model for it, business plan for it, and then start thinking about how you're going to operate. And organically, in a way, if you've got these underlying principles, the model will arrive, or you'll find yourself as in a model of some sort. And then you may then decide to take it legally down a legal route and incorporate it in some way. So
can I just
yes.
I'm aware here that the target audience here is councillors and candidates thinking about election, and therefore business, the structure of a business is the last thing that should be on your mind. If you try and win an election saying I'll set up a cooperative, you'll not win an election.
Okay.
If you talk about and work out what your local issue is, to tackle this local issue, we can do it together. We can all chip in and we can make a difference. We can make it happen. Get people around you. Linda, I think there's a couple of links in the chat now to the ITA values and principles. Linda's put them there. I think one of the important things to think about is that members need to be economically participating in being a cooperative. So it's not just, oh, let's do it all and it's nice and fuzzy. There is actually this sort of hard bit of, I'll put some cash in and yes, that will lead somewhere. And what we do with the dividend is part of the interesting question that comes out of it. But I think we need to start, we could spend hours and hours and hours talking about legal principle, and I'd sort of counsel that in a limited time with this audience, we should be beginning to think about what are some of those wicked issues and how we begin to address them.
Well, that's
begin to do things, because and I've put a link into the Hive there. If you want to ask some of these really basic questions, go to the Hive. If you begin to get somewhere, I would suggest that at that point you get to a practitioner. And one of the things we've done is we've not only used practitioners, but as a council, we've quite often gone, and so has Plymouth Energy Community, to Co-ops UK and said, this is the guidance we're getting. And we paid them for just a small bit of advice on, does this look, the governing documents, by the time we get to that stage, as though it will be a cooperative in the way it works? And if it doesn't, what do we need to do? So that we actually then go and get some really expert legal advice on making sure we tighten the constitution up. But that comes way, way down the line. And there are things you can do, whatever the business model structure is. But I think actually it's about what you're trying to do and how you're going to achieve it that really matters. And that's why I could talk about food, health and death as things that we're currently looking at in Plymouth.
Yeah.
They are many and varied, but they're about tackling the issues.
That's really helpful, Chris. Of course, yes, that's right. But I think it's also quite interesting to be able to recognise where things will have to go in order to be sustainable. And there may be people on this call who might have an idea that they want to develop. There may be people who are councillors or intending to be councillors who want to understand the whole process so that it makes sense to them when somebody comes to them and wants to set up a co-op. So I think knowing and being aware of all the different aspects, I think is quite useful. And you're all doing a great job enlightening us. Ian had a question. I don't know, Ian, has it been answered or would you like to pursue it a bit more? You were concerned.
I wanted to broaden it out if I could.
Yes, yeah.
No, I'm a bit more, I mean, I know Chris, and I'm an ex-councillor, and I had the brief for the economy for Exeter going back a while. But to broaden it out, I mean, I'm just aware there's the sector that I'm in, which is sole trader at home or in co-working spaces. For councillors now, where there are, I mean, in Exeter, I know of several co-working spaces, and I've done some work with people who are based there. I know, for example, in Royal William Yard, down in the jewel of Plymouth, I think, really, there's a co-working space that hopes to launch in the autumn, post-pandemic. How can councils, Plymouth, having the advantage of understanding cooperatives, Exeter, well, it never quite committed, but it's an option. How can councillors engage better with those communities of people who are much more devolved now, because many of them aren't going to be coming into permanent premises, They're going to be much more loosely constituted. Yes, they're going to be online. But how can councils and councillors engage with people to offer them the options? And I really like what Chris said about, you know, let's be pragmatic. If a kick is really engaging with the community, that's better than a co-op that pretends it's a co-op and isn't.
Shall I kick off?
Yeah, who wants to kick off on that, Chris? Yes.
I think it's really difficult. I think as a council, we have to know that our role is facilitation rather than anything else. And some people don't need facilitation. In fact, we've got a number of co-working spaces in Plymouth. I've been involved tangentially with a couple of them, not because I'm a councillor, but just because I've been floating around in Plymouth. And if, you know, so Think Tank in Plymouth has sort of started off as very informal, was co-working in pubs and odd spaces they could find just an afternoon a week, and now they've got a building and they're working really well. They're facilitating that. Millfields Trust, which is a kick, has space that is not only dedicated office space but also has really loose, you can just buy into using premises sort of hot desking as much and as little as you like. So it's one of those bits where as a council, knowing it's there is great. We don't need to step in. If someone came to me and said, oh, I'm now getting to the point where I need business advice on setting up, I'd be saying, well, look, here's a list of people who are experts in that field. Go to them. And that's not my job. My job is to know how to signpost to people. I would not feel comfortable, despite the fact I've done quite a lot of it and even done it professionally in the past, as a councillor advising people on business setup. I'd say go to people like Andrew and Martin, and actually Andrew has worked with us on a number of co-ops in Plymouth, and he's working on some, and I've given him some perspectives to help him in his work with them, because I think that's the job I have. And you know, I didn't do any of the setup stuff for Plymouth Energy Community or its new co-ops or Four Greens Trust. Andrew was involved in some, Fruit Tree was involved in some. Actually, they worked together on bits and with others. And I think that's our job as councils and councillors, is to facilitate where we can. Now that we've done some work in the City Council, we've also got an economic development team that I can signpost people into for support. So I think we don't need to be experts. What we need to know is where that support is. And there are various places around. So Co-ops UK, people ask for specialism. The Co-ops UK directory has got lots of people on it. It's always worth signposting there. You know, CCIN, if your council's a member of CCIN, has its a DPS, so it's got all sorts of access to people on that, and we've used that. So use those bits, talk to those people, find the local experts, and use them. And I think it's more about knowing where those 2 or 3 places are than doing it all yourself, because otherwise you'll be so caught up in doing setup on one bit, you'll actually not get time to do your casework or support all the other people, or begin to get people together facilitating the discussions that could lead to another co-op. So so that would be my steer as someone who's been involved in the sort of front end of being a councillor, whether in control or in opposition, trying to support cooperative development in the city, and how we've done it. And I think, you know, if we were to look at PEC now, 5 legally constituted entities ranging from a charity, a couple of CBSs, limited company, and some currently going as a registered provider and a CBS, you know, all working really well, with millions of pounds worth of asset in ownership, turnover approaching £1 million a year across the whole family, and with exciting ambitions. That's been done in less than 10 years. And it's just about knowing how to signpost people in. So I think for any potential candidates, that's the key. Get those key contacts. And actually, Andrew, Martin and Nicola are all really good routes into those.
Thanks, Chris. That is excellent advice. Really excellent. Thank you. Can I just move on? Now, Josie had a question. Josie?
Hi, yeah. So my question was, well, I had a question earlier about how the food cooperative is profitable, but that was kind of answered in the chat. But my recent question was about, you know, I'm a Labour candidate in the county council elections, and just interested in obviously some people are standing as Labour and cooperative, what that means, if anyone could answer kind of what the Cooperative Party would add to that, or how it works, that'd be great.
Thank you. I mean, I could answer that, but maybe Saxon would like to. Saxon, you're muted.
We obviously are keen to have more Labour cooperative councillors, but the first thing you have to do is join the Cooperative Party. And if any of the people listening, some of our candidates are not already in the Cooperative Party, and I know Hilary and Sue, for instance, and Rob Hannaford are all, so they'll all be standing as Labour Cooperative. And it does, you are then part of a network. There is a support officer, there's conferences, there's opportunities to meet with other cooperative councillors, but the essential bit is to join the Cooperative Party, which is a sister party of the Labour Party, but you, in fact, you can be in the Cooperative Party without being in the Labour Party, as long as you're not in another party. But obviously most of the members are also in the Labour Party.
And I think it's true to say now that if you, Josie, if you became a member of the Co-op Party and you were interested in co-op values, and the Co-op Party has got a wonderful website, you can get lots and lots of information of what the Co-op Party is about and what its values and principles are, and you choose to join, then you can ask to join, get in touch with the organisation, with the branch, with the co-op local branch, and you can find a way to become a co-op and Labour councillor. So it's up to you. And that means that you are promoting cooperative values and principles alongside the work you're doing as a Labour councillor, with all the knowledge and information that comes to you within the Co-op Party and within the co-op movement. Liz?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I feel like, here in Devon, where you come across people who've perhaps got some kind of objection to something about the Labour Party, then just having that extra part about being in the Cooperative Party provides you an opportunity to open up a conversation about where your values are, and I think it's quite a helpful sort of addition to what you're offering.
Mary, I think.
Just to say though, you will have to get your decision made very quickly as to whether you want to be a co-op member, because we are soon approaching days. If we go for a May election, and that's a big if, obviously, we will need to know quite soon who we are being allocated as Labour and co-op, because people are needing to know within the Co-op Party, and I think I've got something like a date of the 6th of February to get something back to HQ.
And Josie, even if you don't get there before the election and you get elected or don't get elected, please join the Exeter and Devon branch of the Co-op Party, and then you'll get more and more information about the organisation. Thanks. Liz, did you have a...
Yeah, Hilary, before I do anything on, I'd like to come back in, but I think it'd be really good to hear from Pat Juby, because Pat is our regional NEC rep and can talk about some of those national bits where the Co-op Party does add substantial value to this. It's more than just joining because it's the party. Actually, there's loads of stuff it's doing as well. So Pat first, then I can come in if possible.
Excellent. Okay, Pat, could
Hi.
you? Hi, well, there you are. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it lights me up. Thank you very much. I wasn't anticipating speaking. I've got various points to make across in setting up a co-op. Like Nicola, it's only about 10 years that I became fully more active within the cooperative movement. I didn't realise how important the cooperative was to me until I found my mum's co-op, Harrogate Cooperative Society books, and basically we furnished our house from that. but yeah, as I say, I got more involved. So I've been involved with trying to get the university sector, because one of the big things I found is a lack of education about cooperatives within the higher education or the business curricula. The cost of setting up a co-op is actually more expensive than setting up a business. So that is also a drawback in terms of setting up a co-op. The co-op is a cooperative is also comes under the auspices of the Treasury, which is why you have to go through the FCA for approval, rather than through whatever acronym is now associated where businesses stand. So that's a bit of a drawback, and the co-op party has tried to do some work in terms of getting that changed. The one thing that hasn't been mentioned has been leisure facilities. I am a director of the local leisure facilities, which were formerly council run, but we've now got a charity taking over the leisure facilities. There is potential for a loss of leisure facilities across the country, and I attended culture, media and sports session, government session, and they were sort of mentioning about the use of the high street for getting more leisure facilities, smaller leisure facilities, and obviously with the COVID, more community initiatives are setting up, and they're now starting to look at ways of trying to go forward. So all these are very, it's very opportune at the moment for cooperatives to actually set up. In terms of the co-op party, we do set cooperative policies, and the I think the policy focus this time is going to be social care and also the high street, because the high street has been devastated by what's going on. So they are the policy development issues for the coming year. But in terms of what they've done in the past, they have influenced Labour policy in terms of forming cooperatives for transport. Nicola might actually be able to say more about what. You put me on the spot, love. I'm returning the compliment. But there's lots of opportunities out there at the moment, and the co-op party is very aware of that. And as I say, we're just starting the policy development programme for the coming year. There is a parliamentary group of Labour and cooperative MPs that meet constantly. Preet Cargill is now the chair of that particular group, and the co-op party is actually chaired by Jim McMahon, who is councillor from Oldham. So we do have quite a bit of influence within the Labour Party from the national executive of the Cooperative Party. And as with everything cooperative, everything comes through from branch to regional, branch to regional, and then to the actual Southwest Party. So we do feedback, we do feed in, and we do feed into national policy within the Labour Party. And as Saxon has said, you can be a member of Labour and Co-op, Labour Party and the Co-op Party. You can be just a member of the Co-op Party. But if you do that, you can't join another party. So the influence is very much to the Labour Party and what they do. Has that helped?
That's lovely, Pat. Thanks ever so much. And it's really good to meet you.
Thanks a lot.
And to make that connection and make it possible for councillors or would-be councillors to contact you if they want any more information. They can email you, can't they?
Yeah,
brilliant. Thanks. Chris, did you want to come back in?
I think it's just a little bit, and then we'll talk a little bit about catered and profit, because that wasn't covered in the case study, I don't think. But in terms of the Co-op Party, it was set up by the cooperative movement, because it felt the cooperative movement felt its voice wasn't adequately represented in government, and the Cooperative Party still works really closely with the movement. It's funded in part by the movement, but also works really closely with Co-ops UK. So there are sort of tandem approaches to influencing policy agendas in Parliament. But it does that on the basis not just of national thinking, as it did in its report to double the size of the co-op economy, but on practical examples from the grassroots. So the co-op councillors and the work that they do in communities feeds into that, which actually then gets churned back out. And if you join in some of the co-op party webinars and Zoom chats at the moment, you can see that in real practical ways. And I think that's a really exciting part, that as a party, we are so rooted in a movement and a set of values and principles that we put into practice day to day and seek to get those to change legislation. And we've seen some really stunning wins over the years, so it is worth looking into the history. In terms of Cllr, Cllr does make a profit. It makes a profit in part because it is scale, so it's providing meals in 67 schools. Some of those are more profitable than others, and some of those are really small and would be loss makers. And if Cllr wasn't there, the school wouldn't be able to afford to run a proper school meal service and would be failed in terms of Ofsted. It would become a failed school automatically and would then be academised. So at the point that local government was told it could no longer run the school meal service as a way to try and get especially primary schools into becoming academies, the primary said they didn't want that, and we set up the co-op with them, so that the schools are members. It does make a profit because of that, because of its very strong local supply chain, because of the way it supports its staff. It does pay the National Living Wage Foundation rate of pay as the minimum. People are on good contracts. The school cooking, as in the old days, is actually trained to one level higher on NVQ than they need to do the job. Actually, that's enormously empowering, and they don't go running off to do other jobs. They actually share that learning in the kitchens. But that all comes together so that holiday hunger has effectively not been paid for by profits, because the schools donate the premises, staff volunteer to get involved, and suppliers give the food. So actually the cost to admin of that is really small. It's got a small internal management base so that most of the stuff goes out to schools, and it actively works with the council and the schools on promoting free school meals. The schools each pay a proportion of the money they receive for school meals to Cllr, but Cllr take full responsibility for the state of all the kitchens and for all the kitchen equipment. So it's a really symbiotic relationship between the members of the co-op, Cllr, and the council. Actually, when it comes to profit, if there are profits, they go back reinvested back into making sure children have healthy food, whether that's better kitchen equipment, or holiday hunger, or other initiatives that tackle that and encourage more school meal take up and fringe stuff. So it's a choice that the schools actually don't get the divvy, but the schools and the council together share any of that back into an agenda. Whereas we could, in theory, most years both take a divvy out of it as the shareholding members, but we don't. So I think it is about coming up with a model that works. It's been hard thought through, and if local authorities get interested in it, I know Brad and his team at Cllr are always really happy to talk to others about what they're doing, how they've done it, but it does require two key partners to invest and hold the sort of rein or a number, and schools to buy in. But if you've got those two key partners, schools choosing to buy in or out and changing it doesn't upset the stability of the capital investment, which you need to have some stability there to be able to keep the service running all the time. So it's hard thought through, but we worked it through from what's the need, how do we build the business, negotiated with the people who are going to be paying for the business and going to be its members, and then roll it on. And it is successful because it's kept close and it's kept run as a good business where profitability is expected by the shareholders. It's just that the profits are rolled back into making sure that Plymouth children eat healthily.
Thanks, Chris. That is really, really helpful, and it's a really good case study and a really good example of how things can work between the council and a business to the benefit of the residents, and how the money can be poured back into the system as well to support. Thanks very much for that. Look, we've got something like 8 minutes left. I want to spend the last few minutes just doing a little bit, have a final question for everybody. But before that, is there anybody got a really, really pressing question they want to ask? I've been looking at the chat and there's been responses to various questions in the chat. Is Mary still there? Can we save the chat for a bit? How can we do that, Mary, when the call's finished?
You're going to have to ask somebody that's got more knowledge than me on internet. So
Andrew. Andrew, can we save this chat? How can we save this chat? Because there's so many good contacts in it.
You can. Nicola and I are competing to answer the question.
Right.
Each of you, each person on the call is able to save the chat for themselves. If you go down to the bit at the bottom where you type in your question and look to the right, on the far right, you'll see 3 parallel dots. If you hold that down, it'll say Save Chat. You can click on Save Chat, and guess what? It saves the chat.
Right. So at the bottom of the, where's that? At the bottom.
Chat. So if you're looking at the whole chat box, and
oh yes, yes, got
type
it.
In,
Save Chat.
That's it. You click on Save Chat, and that will save it on your own machine. And it's also, of course, possible for the host to save it as well. Unfortunately, it's saved, yes, but with the glorious title. You see, when you click it, it says chat saved and then says show in folder on the right. Make sure you click that or you'll never find it, because it's saved with the glorious name meeting.saved.chat. Really helpful, especially if you've got more than one Zoom meeting a year.
All right, okay. Got you. Excellent, thanks very much. Because there's some very good contacts there and it would be a shame for it to get lost. Nicola?
I was just going to say that whoever as this call's being recorded,
yes,
whoever is recording the call, when that saves to your computer, you can also see an audio file and the chat files. So who's ever is
recording it. Is that Liz? Liz, yeah. Okay, Liz.
We'll have access to those. So
thanks very much. I'm glad we've done that because they're so good. Has anybody got I'd hate to, for us to go and can I just see if anyone's got a pressing question that hasn't been covered at all that you would like covered before the end? No. Okay, Martin, could you hang on with what
Saxon
I want to ask a final. I want to ask.
Saxon has her hand up.
Who?
Saxon.
Ah, right. Saxon.
I just wanted to register the fact that we need to take some action following this workshop. And we know that we've got the collapse of residential care likely. We certainly have been warned that a lot of childcare and early years education is going to collapse. And I think we ought to ask the party council to look at how we can set up some sort of campaign.
Yeah, I totally agree, Saxon. I think we'll definitely do that. And I think we'll also be, certainly Sue and I, we're both on this call, we'll be saying something to the Labour group on the council as well in terms of trying to get these sort of things on the agenda. That's we're working hard on that as well. So both at the Labour side and the co-op side, we're working on it. I want to ask one I know this is a ridiculous question to ask at this time when we've got like 4 minutes left, but everybody have about a minute. Just a few words on what you think is the possibilities of co-ops in the economy post-COVID, recognising that COVID is not going to go away anytime soon. So if we start at the top, so everyone's got a chance to say something before we finish. Martin. Chief point. Headliner.
Yeah, not really sure of that. I mean, I think it's just if we ever get out of our houses again, then we simply have to carry on doing what we've been doing prior to that. And I'm guessing that this won't be the last pandemic, so I'm guessing that we're going to have to get pretty expert at Zoom meetings and online functioning. That would be my.
Right. I'm asking, do you think the co-op approach for the economy is going to be a good one?
It has to be. I don't think there's any alternative. And I think when I said earlier that we should abandon the host economy, which is largely speculator corporation based, What I'm saying is that we should be intertrading. We should be applying the sixth principle much more now than ever before. And we shouldn't be doing business with any mainstream banks. We should be doing business with proper cooperative banks. And I don't mean our own cooperative bank, which isn't a cooperative bank anymore, but with wherever possible, mutuals and whatever. Just keep it all within the movement. That would be my advice.
Thanks, Martin. Chris, anything to add to that? You're muted.
I think the time for cooperation is always now, and whatever the issue, there's always going to be a crisis, there's always going to be a problem. It's always the time for cooperation. We can do it individually, we can do it when we're in power, we can do it when we're in opposition, but actually using the values and principles of cooperation always produces good results and a lasting impact. It takes more time, it takes more effort, and yes, Pat's right, it does take a bit more money once you get to formalizing it, but actually it's worth it in much more ways than just you've got another business entity. What I do know from my past experience as a councillor is you do need to have some skin in the game yourself. You can't just tell other people to do it. You need to live and practice and model it. So get actively involved in an existing local co-op. Support something that's already there and learn from it, and it's still all happening even in lockdown, and start working out what the thing is you want to change, and start building other people to create another co-op that does that. So actually get involved, learn from one that's involved, and start actually creating another one, because the real way we'll double the size of the co-op economy is if each co-operator and co-op gets involved in creating another co-op. So that's the challenge, I think, for all of us as councillors, is how we can get involved more in at least one local co-op and how we start setting another one up.
Marvellous. Thank you, Chris. That's very inspirational. Andrew.
I've got a very specific suggestion, which is that we set up one or more asset holding societies, which are able to be invested in by councils and also by the community. And what they do is they have the money ready so that when a high street shop comes up for sale, or a residential care home comes up for sale on the open market, or a leisure centre has to be sold off because the government forces the local authority to sell it off, as may happen, then this mutual organisation will have an opportunity to buy it.
Right, brilliant. Are you going to set it up then, Andrew, and we'll all join it?
It's cooperative here, so I'll be part of a group that does it.
That's what I mean, but somebody needs to be the inspiration, the entrepreneur that gets everything moving.
Feel free to count me in, Andrew. I'll be on board for that one.
Thanks, man.
Sounds good. I like the sound of that. Count me in as well. Veronika.
I think the possibilities are endless, and being on the call, like, there's people who've done it for decades, there's people who've done it for a couple of years, there's people who are into politics, there's people who like are not so much. Everybody like adds different things, so as long as we like hang on to it as much as we can, like it's already happening. It's not that it'll happen, it's already happening. We just have to keep
grow
at
it, so. Grow it. Lovely. Yeah. Thank you. And Nicola, you've got 1 minute.
Very, very quickly, I think with COVID, we saw a massive growth in mutual aid groups across the country where communities came together, and there is no better description of what cooperation is about. So my final words are: keep preaching the cooperative model. The more that we can do, the better world we will be living in.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Which was a super ending. I think it's been a brilliant workshop. I think all the panelists have shown us their expertise, their knowledge, their information, and I hope it certainly inspired me.
Hilary, can I just say that I'm perfectly happy for my email to be shared to all the...
Brilliant. So if you stick it on the chat that people are all now able to save, okay, that would be marvellous. And I just want to say thank you to everybody and all the people sticking with us in the workshop, and all the information that we've been given. I personally have found it incredibly inspiring, and it's going to help me hugely when I take over the chair of the Exeter and Devon branch of the Co-op Party, and hope we're going to be doing lots of interesting campaigns and build our membership. So thank you all very, very much. And I'll say goodbye.